Hello, welcome to the Monday Show via the Everything is Black and White podcast. I'm Andrew Musgrove and he is Mark Others, and we're going to take a deep dive into Newcastle United's 1-0 defeat to Sunderland at the Stadium of Light. Yes, ladies and gents, I'm afraid we must. It is our job. Hopefully, we're going to find out just why it went so badly for Newcastle United. A Nick Voldemort own goal was enough for the Black Cats to win the game, as Newcastle United failed to turn up, raising questions about their understanding of the size of this game. In the build-up, some Newcastle United fans on social media were laughing at comments from the likes of Granit Xhaka and the Sunderland manager about how the first thing they were told when they signed for the club was about how important this game was to fans. Upon reflection, I think those Newcastle fans might think twice about that tweet that they put out, because there was only one team going the extra mile. There was only one team wanting every ball. There was only one team that put in a performance worthy of this game. Newcastle United unacceptably lacked passion, drive, and energy. They were lethargic, standoffish, lacked direction, and really let the fans down with a performance that I cannot understand. Sunderland didn't have to do too much at all to win that game. They created very little, albeit more than Newcastle United, but they coasted that game because Newcastle United allowed them to do so. For the most important game of the season so far, and don't let anyone tell you that it wasn't, for them to turn up and put that performance in that they did needs an immediate reaction. I can accept losing, as I'm sure Mark can. We don't like it, but it happens. What I cannot accept is the manner in which United's so-called stars played a game that you, him, everyone watching and listening would give your absolute all to playing. It was totally unacceptable. Mark?
Yeah, I think I don't think I'd ever accept losing as such, but there are ways to lose, and yesterday wasn't that. There's a bit of a saying in coaching, isn't there? And you'll have heard managers say this, that you play the game, not the occasion. Well, there are times when that's not strictly true. And I think yesterday was one of those occasions where Sunderland played the occasion. They fed off the occasion. They fed off the atmosphere. They gained energy from it. But I think that the tone had been set in the days before the game. I thought, the talk coming out of Sunderland was all about being up for it and taking control of the game. That sort of malaise from Newcastle, I thought, started in the early stages of the game itself, where they looked as if they'd set up to try and nullify Sunderland rather than going and attacking the game and taking the game to Sunderland. The tactical setup was all wrong. The team selection was wrong, in my opinion. But the opening sort of 15, 20 minutes, watching Newcastle almost sit back and contain Sunderland, I just found really, really bizarre, because there was a good comment made. I think it was either Jamie Carragher or Gary Neville on Sky Sports talking about how when you get into that mindset early on, it's very difficult to adjust back into a positive mindset and go and attack the game. So, yeah, I thought the tone was set early on. I thought Sunderland were good in the game. I thought they played the game as they should have done, where it was not giving Newcastle any time on the ball. They rose to the occasion. Newcastle couldn't. Eddie Howe spoke on Friday. He spoke ahead of the game on Sky Sports yesterday about getting the arousal levels right. Well, they absolutely flopped, put it that way. It was a disgusting performance, and it was a one that no player coming off that pitch yesterday, no person in the technical area, no coach, nobody can look back upon that game with any pride whatsoever. It was a dismal day for Newcastle United. Sunderland deserved the win. They deserve to be ahead of Newcastle United on the table and be where they are right now. One of the biggest things I thought yesterday was a lack of leadership on the pitch. I looked at Sunderland and he looked at Xhaka. He was everywhere and he was getting into his teammates and he was, encouraging them to keep the pressure on, keep fighting, keep doing whatever they need to do to win the game. Bruno tried to take it on himself. And we were talking before we started recording here. He was the only player that at times showed what you would expect to see in a derby. But even then, it was just flashes. At one point, he looked like he was trying to do literally everything himself. I would have just liked to have seen a bit more. How do I put this? A bit more. Other player, yeah, Trippier or Shaw when he came on, his experience, but just people taking responsibility.
You want a reaction to a misplaced pass. You want a reaction to someone pulling out of a challenge. You want someone to grab them by the scruff of the neck and say, that is not acceptable in any game, let alone a game of this magnitude. And it wasn't there. And I think if we look at the bigger picture across the entirety of the season, I think, as we mentioned, or I mentioned last week, Newcastle are missing that kind of Kieran Trippier experience. And, I mentioned how I kind of scoffed at Granit Xhaka signing for Sunderland, but it's proved to be an absolute masterstroke by Sunderland. And I think that experience that he brings alongside that quality is a big reason to why they won yesterday and also why they are performing so well. You mentioned kind of about the way Newcastle approached this game. Just thinking about it now, it reminded me of the Arsenal Spurs North London derby a few weeks ago. And I remember sitting there thinking that is totally unacceptable from Thomas Frank and Tottenham Hotspur. Like, it was embarrassing. And yet, I think if you watch the games side by side, you would say actually Spurs probably put in a better performance against their nearest and dearest than Newcastle did against theirs.
I just felt it was the contrast in the approach from both sides, both clubs, but both sides and managers ahead of the game spoke volumes, and it spilled over onto the pitch. I would love to know if any Newcastle United player or any coach or Eddie Howe himself has come away from that game thinking, I gave everything I had there, or have they come off that pitch regretting not doing more? Look, in the last 18 months, this team has rightly had a lot of credit, and Eddie Howe and Jason Tindall have had a lot of credit. They've had a lot of praise, rightly, for amazing wins against your Man Cities, your Arsenals. The Carabao Cup win will live with everyone for a long time, for the rest of our lives. People that were there, people watching at home, that meant the world. But that doesn't mean they can't be criticised. And I don't think there's anyone who wore blue yesterday or anyone who was on the touchline that can't be criticised for what went on in that game. There's a lot, as we've said, there's a lot of questions need answering now about why the Newcastle United of 18 months ago, 2 years ago, where it was all these horrible players where they would do anything to win a game, and it was niggly fouls, and it was in faces, and it was aggression and just complete and utter intensity. How many times have we said that this season? Where's that gone? Where's that Newcastle United of 18 months ago, the team we saw in the Carabao Cup final when, by the way, they played the occasion and they fed off all of that, like I said about Sunderland yesterday? It's really dispiriting, the fact that that team seems a million miles away from where it was back then. And I can't, for the life of me, figure out where it's gone.
It's interesting you mentioned kind of 18 months ago, because before we get into the team news, because there was two big calls that Eddie Howe made, I want to talk about the pre-game atmosphere, because I drove over to Sunderland and I have to say I wasn't really feeling it. It just felt like another game to me. Previously, that FA Cup tie, big massive buzz, and I know because it was the first one in a long time, but I think back to the derbies of old, even when it was kind of the fifth or sixth in a row, I was still excited for the day. This one, I wasn't. And I got to the ground. I was waiting for the coach to put up with the players. And even the Sunderland fans, they were deathly quiet until their coach pulled up. And all of a sudden, that sparked them into life. That was the catalyst. The flares went up, the chanting went, and they didn't show up at all. And then I went round to see the Newcastle United fans going at the turnstiles. Nothing. And I'm not criticising the fans at all. I just think it's a really interesting point to make, because they were faced with Sunderland fans chanting, shouting at them, screaming at them. But there was no reaction really from Newcastle United fans who were waiting to get inside. And even throughout the entirety of the game, it was all very, very quiet. And again, it's not a criticism of Newcastle United fans. I think it's more asking the question of was everyone feeling like that? If you guys watching and listening, if you were there, if you were just sitting at home watching on the TV, how were you guys feeling? Because what I saw when the fans were going to the turnstiles kind of replicated what I felt as a fan driving over to the stadium, and how I woke up that yesterday morning not really feeling it. I think when the fans aren't feeling it for whatever reason, and I might be wrong, tell me if I am, then that transfers onto the pitch. And look, it's up to the players to get the fans up for it. The players have got to give everything, and the fans feed off that. But I was just thinking it kind of set the tone in many ways.
I think there's a lethargy about supporters.
Yeah, it's a good word, that.
I think there's a lethargy about this season, about the summer. I'm sorry, I know I keep going back to it all the time, but it's been a difficult period for the club. And I feel for supporters that have travelled far and wide, have paid ridiculous money, have been through some difficult experiences, have been vilified by some opposition fans for what went on during the summer, and have had to endure one of the best players walking out of the club. There's no other way of putting it, really, is there? And then the fact that the season just feels like there's a malaise setting in. It feels as if everything, I said it a couple of weeks ago, everything's an effort at the moment. Newcastle, they're not just going out and winning games. It's like, you look at the Burnley game when they're playing against 10 men for what, over an hour, and then find themselves scrapping in the 94th minute to hold on to 3 points. Everything feels like an effort at the moment, and it's really difficult to see. So I feel as if there is a bit of a draining effect going on at the moment.
Do you think that maybe is the answer to why it was quieter than I expected as the fans were heading into the ground? Because they sort of expected how the game played out. They didn't think the players were maybe going to put in the performance, mainly because we are away from home and we know what Newcastle United are on the road. So they were just expecting a bit of a difficult afternoon.
So I'll tell you how I felt in the build-up to the game. Once Leverkusen was done and you start focusing on the derby, I went at that game expecting nothing from Newcastle, and you still come away disappointed, which kind of speaks volumes of where expectations are at the moment.
I had one moment in the build-up, like the days beforehand, of a buzz, of excitement, and it was the CBS/Premier League little kind of promo video they did with Alan Shearer and Shea Given. I think it's called Under the Skin. I watched that, and for 2.5, 3 minutes that it was on, I was like, right, I'm up for this now. And then there was just nothing. I spoke to my best friend who's a Sunderland fan, and we were just having a back and forth. And usually in years gone by, it's if we do have a back and forth in the week leading up to the derby, it's not one that I can repeat for a family Newcastle United podcast. But again, it was just kind of, maybe we've just grown up and we've matured, but also it didn't have that kind of undercurrent of a derby, kind of how it used to be. I don't know. I was just feeling like many people watching here have said, a bit lethargic. And as Andrew points out in the comments, as I said, there's nothing to shout about maybe for the fans to go in on a bit of a hype. I expected a little bit more. And again, it's not a criticism of them. I just think it sets the tone. And maybe it was that kind of, we're away from home, we know what's going to happen here. Team news, because there were two. Go on, you sound like you want to jump in.
But I also think, and you hinted at it before, that the players and the manager have got to play their part in that.
It does, but I think just to clarify, the comparison is the FA Cup tie at the Stadium of Light. And again, I know everyone came on a bus, or many buses, so everyone was walking into the ground together. This way it was a bit more dispersed, but there was still a very large group going into the ground together yesterday. But that atmosphere a few years ago was unbelievable. It was so good from Newcastle United fans. It really was, and it set the tone.
Yeah.
I know the levels were different because the teams were different and all of that, but they won the first battle, like they did at Wembley against Liverpool. They won the first battle, and it's not down to the fans, of course not. It's down to the players, but they do have a hand in that. And I think if the fans are going in a little bit down in the dumps even before kickoff, then that does set the tone. But the question has to be asked to why are they feeling like that, and that's the key question. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, and you were there, and I'm totally missing the point here. But in my view, it was deathly quiet. So the question is, why are Newcastle United fans, for the biggest game of the season so far, rocking up to their rivals and actually feeling like we're not really going to be chanting, we don't really feel like it? Like, why?
Yeah, I just think that the responsibility has to go elsewhere.
No, but that's the point.
No, I know.
That's the point I'm making, and we know the answer is,
yeah.
Because especially away from home, but really as a whole over this season, there's nothing to shout about.
Because the players, the manager, the club as a whole generally this season haven't given fans something to get into. Again, the lingering thing from the summer, look, the performances you expect of an Eddie Howe Newcastle United side have been few and far between this season. And brutally, they tend to come against the big clubs, which was and when I say modicum of hope I had for yesterday was that they would raise their levels for a big game. But you look at the games when they have done that, even though they lost Liverpool, beat Manchester City, sides like that, winning those games, there are quite big questions to be asked to the manager and the players themselves. Like, I would love to know, and I've said this before on here, you mentioned Alan Shearer before. If he was in that dressing room at full time yesterday as a player, there would have been players up against the walls. There would have been, arguments. There would have been people being called out. And I hope that's happened. I really do, because players need to be held responsible for the absolute lack of drive and determination they showed yesterday, because it was, again, completely unacceptable. They've let supporters down massively. They've let the club down. And I don't just mean the players, by the way. I mean everyone involved. They've let the city down. And it's going to take a lot to get rid of that from people's minds. A lot. Because it stings.
Team news. 2 big calls, as we mentioned. Lewis Miley gets the start that we all wanted. How did he do?
All right. But much like the whole midfield, were overrode by Siddiqui and Xhaka, who I thought were excellent. And I know we're on a Newcastle United podcast and we want to talk about Newcastle, but I thought Xhaka was excellent midfield. I thought he dominated it. And, he was the midfield general Newcastle didn't have yesterday. I thought Siddiqui was busy and got in amongst Newcastle, and Newcastle's midfield couldn't handle it. I thought the little sort of, although the formations initially looked quite similar, the fact that Lefebvre was playing more as a sort of number 10, where he was in an area where Newcastle just couldn't pick him up, just meant that Newcastle's whole midfield, not just Lewis Miley, were kind of overawed a bit. On the ball, I thought he did all right, but you know what I think of Lewis Miley, and I think he will go on to be a regular part of Newcastle's side. And I thought, as I say, he did all right yesterday, but it was just such a difficult game for him because he needed people around him that were really taking the battle to Sunderland, and it didn't happen.
Still the right call? I think it was the right call.
I think it was the only call. I don't think, the less said about Joe Willock's performance when he came on, the better. Ramsey, who knows? Joe Linton was clearly not fit, otherwise he would have started the game or at least come on. So it was probably the only call. But look, I think Lewis Miley deserved his place in the side more than anything, which makes it the right call.
Anthony Elanga then on the right wing, which shocked me. It really, really did. I didn't see it coming at all. And it's easy for me to say now, but I think it was entirely the wrong call, Mark. I really, really do. Elanga has so much pressure on his shoulders to perform, given the price tag, given how he's done since he joined in the summer. And he'll be applying that pressure to himself as well, because he knows it's not been good enough. On one hand, you say, well, this is a game where you can become a hero. But also, when I think it's safe to assume that mentally he might be a little bit fragile, so much riding on this game, it just wasn't the right environment for Elanga at all. And it showed. He couldn't drop a bag of cement, couldn't beat his man, no product to make an end of, if that makes sense. It was just a really, really poor afternoon. And all it's done is set him back so far from that Everton game. Look, we don't want to. This isn't about Elanga, really. And I know that people listening and watching this will say, well, you advocated him signing, you made some wild and wonderful predictions. And yeah, I'm not hiding away from that. And I can hold my hands up and say at this moment in time, it looks like I've got it very, very wrong. And it was a very, very poor performance from him.
So I tried to, after the game, about 2 hours after the game, put myself in Eddie Howe's shoes before the game and tried to work out why Elanga was started. And the only thing I can come up with is that there was this intention to play on the break, on the counter-attack. And he wanted more pace in the side, so you go Elanga and Gordon out wide. That's the only thing I can think of. And if that was his plan, it just didn't work, simple as that. Elanga looked devoid of confidence, completely devoid of belief. His pass selection, when he did try to pass, was appalling. His delivery in the box was nowhere near good enough. It was kind of summed up by one of his first touches when he tried to break down the kind of right-hand side to get a cross in, and he's just ran it out of play. Gordon did that as well, by the way.
Oh, don't worry, I've got the stats on Gordon.
I mean, I'll come back to Elanga. Gordon's best moment of the game was literally before he got taken off, when he beat two men and then got brought down and then got taken off. Anyway, Elanga, look, I still do think there's a player in there. I really do. But at the moment, it's not working. The thing that surprised me most about him starting the game is generally in bigger games, Eddie Howe has gone to Jacob Murphy because he trusts him. And I really thought he would start. I know Bonds has done brilliantly, and he's probably one of the players of the season so far, from a very small group, by the way. So I naturally thought he would go towards Murphy because of that trust element, and because he is one of the ones that's going to work a little bit harder. Elanga has done Eddie Howe no favours whatsoever with that performance. And as I think you were alluding to, Eddie Howe has possibly done Elanga no favours by starting him.
There was a moment in the first half, and he gets the ball halfway line, and there's space to run into, and it's about his fourth touch of the dribble. He just literally boots it in at the defender. And you're just thinking, oh my God, it can't be that difficult. It really, really can't. I mean, look, that is a player who's devoid of confidence. And then on top of that, you've got this environment that he's been thrown into. Absolutely shocking. Gordon was no better. And again, he did something similar where he tries to beat the man, and it's his second touch, which literally just plays it into the defender. It was absolutely just shocking. And for a man who claims to be this mentality monster, well, where is he? Where is he? He claims to get up for these big games. Well, there's no bigger game than this, and he did not show up. Attempted just 12 passes, only 7 came off, just 22 touches. Where is the Anthony Gordon that Anthony Gordon thinks he is?
It's all right, though, isn't it?
Well, we'll make up for it on Wednesday. And them comments about that. I mean, I spoke about it in the introduction there. There was only one team and one set of players who seemingly understood what this game meant. Now, whether that's because they had no local lads in the team and they look at it slightly different, I don't know. But whatever the reason, Sunderland understood it. They played the occasion and they went that extra mile, which you should be doing in a derby. Anthony Gordon to come out after the full-time whistle and to post on Instagram, and I've got the full quotes here, right? Totally underperformed today in a game that would have meant so much to everyone. We can only apologise, reset, and try to make it right on Wednesday. Getting to the semi-final of the Carabao Cup will be fantastic and brilliant. It's not going to make us forget that performance on Sunday.
The only thing that'll make up for it is in March, isn't it? Is it March the game at St James's?
26th, yeah. So think about it, but
I think it would possibly annoy me if they go. I mean, obviously you want them to win on Wednesday and get through, and hopefully go a step closer to defending the Carabao Cup. But at the same time, I think it would just annoy me because I'd be sat there thinking, where was this on Sunday?
Well, we spoke about this earlier in the season, haven't we?
We spoke about it too much.
Exactly, and that's the real frustration. We'll get onto that because there are questions to ask of Eddie Howe. But I just think comments like that from Gordon, you're just not reading the room. You're really, really not. And sometimes it's just better to be quiet and not active on social media.
If I was any of those Newcastle players, I would have just turned my phone off and left it for a good few days. I wouldn't have been on social media. I don't want apologies. I'll tell you what was quite stark difference as well was the difference between Eddie Howe's post-match comments and Bruno's post-match comments in the mix zone.
Raging.
Now, if you said to any Newcastle fan watching this that have seen both those interviews, I know which one's more aligned to where Newcastle fans are at right now, and it wasn't the managers.
Bruno, no shooting, no crossing, no passing. Should have demanded the ball more, which is accepted the way they will play. Long balls, they won the duels. In derbies, we have to win the duels. Not a full set of quotes, just a little segment there. But yeah, Bruno, full of passion. Those who spoke to him said it looked like he'd been crying. We spoke there about Alan Shearer was in the dressing room where I think Bruno has hopefully given some sort of a similar reaction, but he can't do it all. He can't do it all. We talk about players who come out with some credit, and Bruno for me is probably the only one. He had the first shot on target, 67th minute. It was a nothing shot, keeper comfortable. But he was, as you said, trying to do something. And the reason I say he comes out with praise is because he was trying to do something. He was trying to drag the team forward. He was trying to create something. But not for the first time this season. He's been doing it himself. And that's so, it's not sustainable for him nor the team.
It's not, you're right. I can't disagree with anything you just said there. I mean, I didn't think he was great, Bruno, but at least he looked as if he was trying to make things happen. I just felt he became more increasingly frustrated as the game went on, which meant he took everything on his own shoulders.
It reminded me slightly of sometimes, and this is going to get a laugh in the comments, of a five-a-side on a Monday. And you know, like when you're playing with your mates or you're playing in a little league and one of your teammates isn't quite doing it, so you just try and chase everything down, and you try and take. That's what it kind of you lose your discipline slightly, and obviously the levels are totally different, and the size of the pitch is totally different. So I'm being a slightly jovial here, but that's kind of what it reminds us of, like where you're like, right, do you know what? I'm just going to take it upon myself to do absolutely everything. And when we're talking about professional athlete and the level within the professional game, Bruno should not be put in that position where he's the only one thinking, well, I'm going to take control here.
So the flip side of that is if I'm an Anthony Gordon or an Anthony Elanga or anyone else in blue on that pitch yesterday, and I'm watching my captain trying to do all of that, surely at some point you've got to go, I've got to up my levels here.
But answer the question that I originally asked you, Mark, about where's the Anthony Gordon thinks he is.
It's not just him, but yeah, I mean, it was poor. The sad thing is there have been little flashes of the old Anthony Gordon in recent weeks. But then he puts in an absolutely nondescript display yesterday, which was kind of the Anthony Gordon that first arrived at Newcastle, where you think, oh, he's got himself in a good position here, and then it just wouldn't happen. Now, I'm always really wary of kind of, because of the Derby defeat, because the passions are run so high, of getting carried away with criticism. But there are a lot of Newcastle players there that have done their reputations a lot of damage from putting in just really poor displays yesterday. And, you know, a few of them really do have to be looking at themselves in the mirror and asking, why could I not hit those levels yesterday in such a big game? Did it mean as much to them as it does to everyone else? Possibly not. Obviously, your Dan Burns and Miley's will know. But that shouldn't matter, because if that's the mentality you're going to have going into a game, regardless if it was Sunderland or Arsenal or whoever, your mentality to play in the Premier League has to be top end every single game. You can't just throw one in every now and then. If you want to be, and this goes back to an argument we've had on here so much, if Newcastle want to be an elite club, and by elite, I mean challenging for league titles, challenging for major honours, playing in the Champions League every year, you can't put in performances like that in such a big game. You can't put in performances like that in any game. The mentality has to be at the top end of the game, at the top level, every single game, minute in, minute out. And look, again, I'm sorry, I'm going back to it. Xhaka showed that mentality yesterday. He hauled Sunderland through in difficult moments. The very, very few difficult moments they had, by the way. But he did it, and he's done it throughout the season. And Newcastle are kind of lacking that, if I'm honest.
Indeed. I'm going to jump into the comments here. We've got Omar saying, shocking results. Elanga showed no fight, just absolutely shocking. He says it's probably the worst signing in the last 10 years, which I think is a little bit harsh. You know, still a little bit of time for him to turn that around. Emma says, I don't agree that the fans weren't up for it. It definitely wasn't the way in the city centre. Should not be apathy from fans or players for a game like this. Absolutely no excuses. Martin says, not sure it was dreadful. Result was predictable, as Sunderland have done what we should have done by good, hungry players. Instead, we've made multimillionaires whose hunger isn't there.
Sorry, can I just jump in on that? And I said the same thing earlier. The fact the result was predictable should be a warning sign in itself. Because, and this isn't anything to do with the status of both clubs or whatever, the fact that you're going into such a big game thinking the result is almost a foregone conclusion is a massive red flag for me.
Well, I think that leads into the answer as I was speaking about before, about why the fans were maybe a little bit quiet going into to the ground. Graham says it was so disjointed, backed by lethargy and poor performances. Eddie, time to earn your crust and get this stalled truck moving again. Lots of people not happy with Alanga, no Ramsey. We've got Paul saying it's not the new signings though who need to stick, it's the Tenaris and Gordons. It's as if winning a cup, they don't need to do anything more for Newcastle United. Let us know in the comments your thoughts on that.
That's an interesting one, because I was thinking that on the way in about has the mentality changed by the cup win, because for years at Newcastle it's been about who's going to end this trophy drought, who's going to win the first major domestic trophy since '55. Now that's been done, what is the target? What do the club want to achieve? What do the players want to achieve? Is it a case of they've done that? So now that's the big achievement in Newcastle. So they start thinking of what's next and what is next. Because for me, you don't want to do Stu at once. You want to keep doing it. And I look at the big clubs, the elite clubs, how they're challenging for trophies year in, year out, and the motivation's always there. Sometimes I feel this season it's been a lack of motivation from Newcastle. And that's that again, looking long term, in fact, looking short term or long term, that's a real concern.
Let us know in the comments your thoughts on that. The Newcastle lack of motivation having ended that long wait for a trophy. A penny for Harvey Barnes' thoughts. He's played a lot recently, but he's arguably been the most productive winger over a long period of time.
I don't think it's even an argument.
Why has he been taken out of the side? You might argue it's fatigue because there's so many games, but this is a game in which you find that extra 20% because the adrenaline's running and it's going through you. So, yeah, you might be a bit tired, but all of a sudden you're up for it because of what this game means. And he also came off the bench for a good 30 minutes, so you can't be that tired.
The simple answer to that is I don't know. As I said a couple of weeks ago that, they've got all the stats and fitness stats that they need. So maybe it was a rotation thing, but if we're going purely on form, then Harvey Barnes should be starting week in, week out. He's got more assists, I think, than anyone else in the side. I think only Voldemort has scored more goals in the league this season or in any competition. He consistently looks our most dangerous player going forwards. And I really do feel for him, because I feel as if ever since he's come to Newcastle, he's had this constant fight to prove himself. Yet hasn't always been given a fair crack of the whip. Yet I think the big moments, the West Ham game in his first season when he came off the bench that day and scored twice later on, the big moments he's had this season. And I feel as if, whereas other players in the squad don't have to prove themselves, Barnes has this constant, and it feels like an uphill battle to say, right, this should be my shirt. I should be starting week in, week out. And I really do feel for him. I really do.
I think going forward, Wednesday and then the Chelsea game for me, it's Barnes on the left, Murphy on the right.
Yeah.
And we all know Gordon will start one of those games. For me, he hasn't earned it. Give Barnes that run of games that he deserves after being the player who's really dragged us through a difficult time, because without his goals, alongside the performances of Bruno, it's scary to think where Newcastle United would be. It really, really is. It was a terrible first half. No real quality from both sides, Mark. The real moment for Newcastle in that first half is when Voldemort is played in, and if he gets the ball across to Gordon out on the left, Gordon arguably scores, and we are probably talking about a Newcastle United victory. Didn't come off. There was the moment as well towards the interval when Brian Brobbery caught Lewis Miley just above the ankle. He'd already been booked. It wasn't a red card. It was certainly a yellow, and that we're clutching at straws here. Not going to criticise the referee because it happened so quickly, and obviously VAR can't get involved in that. But it does possibly change the outcome of the game, doesn't it? With Sunderland going down to 10 men. No arguments. It was a second yellow, really.
Yeah, it would have been a second yellow, as you say. VAR can't get involved, but much as you said there, don't blame the referee for missing it, because it happened so quickly. If he does see it, then it's certainly a second yellow, and Robbie walks. But again, as you said, it is absolutely clutching at straws. I think the difference between the two sides yesterday, even then I wouldn't have had 100% confidence that Newcastle would go on and get a result, even against 10 men. Such was the effort that Sunderland put in.
Half time, I was really hoping that the players would get a telling off, because it was not good enough at all. No positives in that first half whatsoever. No passion, no drive. It was just terrible. And I was hoping that Eddie Howe would really go in on the players and we'd get a reaction. Now, we didn't really get the chance to see if a reaction was coming, because they scored just after the restart. But obviously it comes from Sunderland getting down, putting the ball in the box. So clearly, Sunderland started how Newcastle United didn't, kind of on the front foot. What do you think was said at half time? I mean, it's difficult to say because they scored so early on, but we have to hope that the message was, it is unacceptable the way you guys have just performed.
Well, you would hope there would be questions asked of why the levels were so low in terms of energy and intensity and, I hate to say it, but desire.
At one point in that first half, Sunderland had more than 70% possession. 70%.
So, yeah, I mean, the possession thing, fair enough, but...
Mark, this isn't Man City, this isn't Arsenal.
No.
Sunderland, with all due respect.
I get that. But it's about what you do with the possession, and Sunderland didn't really threaten first half. They sort of kept them at bay. My concern with that is, why are Newcastle going into a game like that just wanting to keep the opposition at bay? That would be my concern about the possession, because Sunderland didn't really threaten. Ramsdale's not really made a save first half, and the defence hasn't really been threatened. So they've kind of kept them in front of them. But at the same time, why Newcastle having that mindset going into the game like that? That's a real concern for me. The biggest one would be Sunderland winning more duels constantly and picking up more second balls constantly. The midfield, I'm sorry, I keep going back to the midfield battle, but the amount of times, particularly in the second half, when Siddiqui and Xhaka won second balls ahead of Newcastle players or read the game better, I was getting more infuriated by it.
Basics not being done.
That's the thing. Sunderland, look, it wasn't a great game of football. It was a typical derby where it was more about who wanted it more and all that sort of stuff. It wasn't about who's more skillful, who can do the pretty stuff. It was about doing the basics well. And Sunderland won that derby because they did the basics infinitely better than Newcastle United did.
No arguments whatsoever. A great header, though, from Nick Valdemar.
Yeah. I mean, look, firstly, the defending is so poor. The cross comes in far too easily. And I really feel for Valdemar. It's just coming in that quickly. And, yeah, if it's the other end, you're thinking, wow. I saw some online criticism of Ramsdale. There's no keeper in the world saving that. There isn't. It's gone past him that quickly. And I really felt from you could see as soon as it went in Valdemar, and you can see, I know we'll go back to social media post, it has hurt him. And I think this is where people are going to have to get round him. I think he looks a sort of player. You mentioned it really early season. If he goes a few games without scoring, how's his confidence going to be? You look at this, players are going to have to get round him, I think. And not just his mates, not the Malik Chiaos of this world, but everyone. I've got no doubt Nick Valdemar will go on to be a great player for this football club. But I think now is when people do need to get round him. But yeah, I felt from that, that's what it kind of summed up the game, didn't it? That's what decided the derby.
And it was another really frustrating afternoon for Valdemar. Not really of his own making. Okay, yes, we can criticise him for not getting that pass off to Anthony Gordon in the first half, but that aside, he's just not getting.
He's feeding off scraps.
Yeah, and that's the issue. And look, it's quite clear that he's not built for the system that Eddie Howe has deployed at Newcastle, and that has been so successful for so long. He hasn't got that pace to press. That high intensity's dropped off. Not all down to him, but you would argue a large part down to him because he just hasn't got the legs to do it. And I get there's a quick turnaround in games, and I get Newcastle haven't really got the time on the training pitch to adapt and to deploy a new formation and a new tactic. And someone said it's worked so well for the large part of Eddie Howe's time here, why change it? But I think we're getting to the point now where it just has to be changed. And whether you sacrifice 2 or 3, 4 games until it's working properly, and then we see the benefits, I'm in the camp where I'm like, let's just do it, because it's quite clear that the system of old is not working, and just repeating it game after game it's ridiculous because it's not working. Voldemort cannot press. The wingers have lost that high intensity. There's no cohesion among the front three like there was a couple of seasons back. And then look, Isak didn't really do it very well, but he did it. He was able to do it better. I mean, Callum Wilson, when he was fit, did it really well. But time after time, game after game, especially away from home, we're sitting there within, well, he's not capable of doing it. So let's not repeat it against Manchester United, Old Trafford. Let's not repeat it against Burnley. Let's change it. Let's do something. And I hope, I say hope with an expectation, that the change comes with Voldemort dropping into a number 10 role and Wissa playing off his shoulder. Now, it won't happen because then you leave yourself vulnerable on the bench because you haven't got an out-and-out striker to switch it up. But if that's not the solution, fair enough. But there has to be something else that they have to try now because this system is just not working and we are far too far through the season to saying it'll click next week because there's no evidence to suggest that it'll click on a regular basis, and that is the issue.
So you partly mentioned it there, but Voldemort's best games this season have all come when the wingers were at it and playing well and giving him service and getting close to him. I looked at yesterday and you had Alanga basic on that touchline, Gordon on that touchline, and then Voldemort kind of central with no one from midfield getting forward to support him. So and not that you were, but his performance can't really be criticised apart from that one moment when he should have played in Gordon. I get that. But every time the ball went up to him, I looked around and he was like 20, 30 yards away from, his teammates were 20, 30 yards away from him. If it's going to work, then I feel as if I'm repeating myself from previous weeks. If it's going to work, the wingers have got to get closer to him and someone from midfield has got to take it upon themselves or be told to get closer to him and commit to supporting him from midfield. Because, he didn't win a lot yesterday, if I'm being brutally honest. But even when he did, he was looking around and thinking, there's just no one here.
So you suggest that actually there doesn't need to be a change in tactics. There needs to be a change in the instruction where, and we've spoken about this previously, the instruction needs to be really hammered home that actually someone has to run on beyond him.
It's bravery. It's bravery that's needed from a midfielder.
I'm getting a sense of deja vu here, Mark.
Yeah, and you should be, because this is what the season is. The season is the same arguments and the same questions being asked without answers being given. That's what's happened this season at Newcastle. We're consistently asking the same questions of Eddie Howe, the same questions of the team, and they're not answering them. So again, the best performances have come when someone from midfield has taken it upon themselves or been told, whatever you want to say, to get close to Nick Voldemort. It didn't happen on Sunday. There wasn't once when a midfielder broke beyond him. So what you're doing then is you're literally saying to the front three, and two of the three we've already spoke about were really poor, but you're literally saying our creative focus is on you. Nobody else is helping you. Apart from, as we said, Bruno tried to do it. There was a lot of pressure on that front three to click. Now, to answer your question, I agree I would change it. I would go to two in the middle. I would play Voldemort as a 10 with two wingers and then Wissa up top when Wissa can play 90 minutes, which I'm not sure is yet. But that point has to come soon, by the way. Now he's committed to not going to the AFCON. He has to get game time. I did actually think when he came on yesterday, it was nice seeing a striker, an out-and-out striker, and the chance that he almost had where the cross was deflected. And I mean, if he'd gone at the ball just a split second sooner, he scores.
Yeah. And I think the point about that chance is that, with all due respect to Nick Voldemort, he's nowhere near that ball.
No, I'd agree with that. And I think this will be the difference that we should say. I look forward to seeing them play together because I think they've got all the makings of a very good partnership.
Do you think it'll happen? Because part of me worries that Eddie Howe is very set in his way when it comes to that formation. And look, it's worked so well that you could understand the argument to actually, well, why would I change it? Because he's got full belief in the system and he's got full belief in his players that it will click. So I can understand that argument. And I I'm not a better man, but if I was, I wouldn't be betting that we'll see Wissa and Voldemort playing together anytime soon.
No, but I think Eddie will fall back on he's not ready to play 90 minutes and we'll gradually work him in. And then there's also the discussion that things happened about Voldemort is looking like fatigued at the moment, which is kind of understandable because he has carried the brunt of the attack and threat for the first half of the season. So I think there will come a point, but I don't see it coming before January. Which goes into a completely different conversation, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does indeed. We've got Jeff saying we're not playing to Voldemort's strengths. First half, we pumped it long. Second half, Voldemort looked like he was asked to play on the shoulder of the last man. We have not adapted to his profile. Mark says Gordon is hugely predictable. It's the same over and over again. Why he fears taking a man on more than twice in a match is beyond me. In Mark's opinion, his time at Newcastle United is done. Stuart says, what is his team good at anymore? Want to answer that one? I think look, we obviously we're very angry at losing the derby and the performance and quite
inconsistency.
But we saw against Everton what they were good at when they managed to hit teams with a bit of pace. Now Everton handed that game to them in many ways with the mistakes, and they were dreadful. Newcastle United, I think, are still a very good side when they are playing counter-attacking football. That's what they're good at. But I think we're just in this weird kind of transitional phase of what they're good at, but also where they're heading to. And it's no longer a counter-attacking side. It's difficult. Let us know in the comments, what you think Newcastle United are good at, Mark. Go and give us one before I move on.
Well, counter-attacking when it's done right. The one thing I think that when I say frustrated me, I mean from a Newcastle point of view, but the one thing Sunderland did, or another thing they did yesterday, it's the two wingers, so Talby and Traore, kind of nullified any attack and threat from Lewis Hall and Tino Livramento, which is a big part of Newcastle's attacking game.
They didn't help themselves, those two, and they were not the only one, but I mean, some of the passing was just, it was just all at sea. Like, even just the basic passing, in front of you 4 or 5 yards was just awful. There was one moment on the right wing midway through the second half when, for maybe the first time in the game, Bruno, Livramento, and Jacob Murphy had actually got a nice triangle together, and Murphy ended up trying to give it back to Livramento, but he'd put it 3 yards behind him, so Tino had to stop in his tracks and quickly hurry back to get it. It's like, well,
there was a lot of that yesterday, though.
Then that's the frustration. It's just the simple things not being done. And if you're not doing the basics, if you're not doing the simple things, then you're going to struggle to win football games.
So it is little things like that mean a lot in a game like this. So there was more than that one occasion where Newcastle could have got down the wings, and they've got a player, as you say, Livramento or Hall, or even one of the wingers who we've criticised, and they've got themselves going forwards, but the pass to them has gone behind them, so it's stunted that momentum, which has then allowed Sunderland to get back into shape. That was one of the most frustrating things about yesterday, that Newcastle wasted so many opportunities to at least get themselves up the pitch. And I'm not saying create chances, by the way, because they were few and far between, but certainly to give them a chance to create chances. It was just dismal all around, absolutely dismal.
Got Joey saying, has there been a loss in confidence in the club manager after the Isak saga, do you think, Mark? Not really sure how it would be down to Eddie Howe.
Yeah, I thought Eddie managed the Isak situation brilliantly. Yeah. Waited until the very last minute to really say what had gone on, try to protect him just in case he could have been brought back into the fore. I don't think you can use that as an example of why there may have been confidence or trust lost in Eddie. What I would say is that unless this inconsistency can be resolved, then there may be a slight waning of confidence in Eddie, because that is hampering the progress that was made last season, the remarkable achievements of last season. So I think that would be the question I'd be asking of Howe, not necessarily Isak.
Let us know in the comments your thoughts on that, we mentioned the subs, and I guess Murphy does what Murphy does. He just puts the ball into the box, and we saw that with the Wissa chance. Very, very close. I think, Wissa in a month's time probably puts that into the back of the net, but Newcastle had to wait until 67 minutes for the first shot on target that came from Bruno, but it was an easy save. Those subs that we are talking about came just before the hour mark. I mean, the subs, did they come too late in the game? I mean, for me, I would have taken Elanga and Gordon off at half time. Yeah. I understand why Eddie Howe doesn't. He's got a plan and all of that. But they were that poor. If they'd been given the bib at half time, they would have had no arguments.
No, I would agree. But I think Eddie's more the sort of manager that would say to them in the dressing room, it's got to be better. We'll give you, get back out there and improve. And if not, then there are replacements there for them. But I thought in terms of wide positions, I'm not going to say it was a massive improvement because that would be absolutely disingenuous. But when Murphy and Bonds came on, all of a sudden it looked as if there was a little bit of a threat from out wide. There were certainly more balls went in the box.
Do you think that Gordon and Elanga, more Gordon than Elanga, are they playing for themselves rather than, because I look at some of the performances and that lack of cohesion up front with the pressing nature, but I just has that kind of connection gone?
I think it's a difficult accusation to throw at a player to say they're playing for themselves. They can give that impression. The amount of times Gordon cut in yesterday and looked at it, he was trying to whip a shot away before being closed down instead of just getting down the line and putting a cross in. Same with Elanga. But I don't think they're playing for themselves. I think that would be slightly harsh, as harsh as we want to be today. They were certainly poor. In fact, it was worse than poor from both players. But in terms of the subs, I felt Eddie gave them a chance to improve after half time. They didn't. If anything, it got worse, barring that one little run that Gordon had when he was brought down for the yellow card before he went off, literally as he went off. So he's brought on the changes then to give them time to make an impact. They did have a little impact, and there was certainly an improvement, but just not good enough all around.
Got a couple of questions to answer before we finish, but first, we're going to just quickly do a little mention of our sponsors. So first off, big thanks to NordVPN for continuing to sponsor the podcast. Keep yourself safe while browsing on public Wi-Fi. The link will be in the podcast description box. Our new sponsors, fpro.com. We've got the gear here, Mark. Are you ready? We're going to do a little unveil. I know that's a little bit heavier than I thought, trying to lift that up. Do you want to unhook that? Do you know what? That would be the perfect sized box to hide like a Toblerone in. What? That's what my dad used to do when we were little, because my mum was obsessed with Toblerone chocolate, so you'd have to find different sized boxes, disguise what the Christmas present was, even though we all knew that it was Toblerone. Yeah. So, in this bag is the F-Pro mat. So you can see, not very big at all. Anything else in that box there? And this unravels, so you go F on the front, and you can put that in front of the TV, you can put that in the kitchen, in the bedroom, and let your kids train themselves with. Yeah, these are the F-Pro socks, which you will put on so you don't damage the mat. You have to have your own football, so that doesn't come included. Or maybe it does. Saying that, actually, I think there might be a football in this box. I said that. I wondered. Oh my God, I think there is a football. Oh no, is it? Oh, there is a football. Of course there's a football. Why football? So this is the F-Pro Momax Elite Ball. So there you go. So here's the full kit. It's dual bonded with panels, both machine stitched and sealed for less water intake. Made with durable textured PU for greater touch. Fantastic. Well,
so if anyone fancies joining us for a kick around on
well, I tell you what,
Old Square in a moment.
Send this into St James's Park and say, try and improve yourselves, lads. But yeah, F-Pro, you need the app to download. Got your wafer built training drills to help you improve yourself as a player. You can use it outside. You can use it in pretty much any space you've got in the house. We've got a discounted offer for you guys. Click the link in the podcast description box or go to fpro.com/EIBW20 and you'll get up to 60% off on your fpro.com training mat. All the gear, brilliant stuff. You're supporting the podcast at the same time, or just head to fpro.com and use that discount code EIBW20. Thanks to fpro.com for the sponsorship. We're going to have fun with that afterwards, aren't we?
It's good. That's a proper advert.
Look at that. Brilliant. I can't wait to use that. I feel like that could improve my Monday night football skills.
Well, I'm coaching again now, so
we'll try and get you 20 of them for the coaching for the team. Right? Yes. Sorry. This question from Ian that has been put in is getting lots of likes, so I'm going to read it out. Ian says, "I would listen to offers for Gordon, Asula, Kraft, Lascelles, Ashby, maybe Share and Murphy too. Bringing Marquis to play with Chow, bringing Sessagon as backup to Hall, Semenyo, Clivert, or Tavernier for the wing." Let's go through that in stages.
Let's just process all that. So hang on, I'm just going to read through. So Kraft, I think, will go at the end of the season anyway.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll get offers in January. Same with Lascelles, same with Ashby, same with Shaw, if I'm honest. I can see him going. Murphy, I assume, is Alex, possibly?
No, I think he might be Jacob, I think.
Right, okay. Gahey, I would 100% agree, but I think he'll go somewhere, with all due respect, Newcastle, more glamorous. I would love to see Semenyo at Newcastle, and I think he was possibly right up there. Clivert, I'm still scarred from watching his dad underperform from large parts of his time at Newcastle. But I do love Justin Clivert. I think he's a great player. They certainly do need to refresh the options out wide. I think they would get good value for Gordon, despite his performances. Be interested to see what if a bid came in for him. Asula, yeah, I think he could be one that will go in January, whether it's a loan with a view to a permanent or. But in terms of the players, Gahey, I would absolutely love to see at Newcastle. I just think it'll be he'll go to somewhere bigger.
There we go. Let us know your thoughts on Ian's wish list. He says, "Can you donate one of those F-Pro mats to Anthony Gordon?" Thought that might pop up into the comments. We saw a bit of fighting towards the end. Far too late. 93rd, 94th minute. And actually, it just angered me more than anything.
It did. It really did.
Absolutely angered me more than anything because where was that throughout? Not even the fact that you're pushing and shoving, just in general. You show up in 50-50 challenges, just wanting the ball more. It was just Newcastle totally lost their heads.
But that reaction was born out of frustration, not desire or anything like that. It was just frustration that they knew that they hadn't performed, and I think it just played into Sunderland's hands.
It helped them waste time. It disrupted what little flow Newcastle United had managed to build. And look, there was plenty of moments towards the end of that game where you go, this sums up Newcastle's afternoon totally. Ball in the box. Murphy needlessly has his hands all over the defender. Stonewall foul. Joe Willock down the left, played in by, I think it was Harvey Barnes, and he just slices the ball in the home end. Like, there's 3 or 4 other examples you go, that sums up the quality on show today.
The very last seconds of the game when they had the ball midway inside the Sunderland half and went backwards instead of just putting in the box. I just couldn't get that.
And then Bruno arguing with the referee at full time about something. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the fact he's arguing,
I think he wanted more time. I don't know.
Time.
But
yeah, more time to pass it sideways.
He played the right amount of time anyway. Obviously, the yellow cards had happened and whatever else had happened, but then he's added on 2 minutes on top of what was added on already. So,
Eddie Howe's comments after the game, he apologises a few times. He says that it was better than Brentford and West Ham.
So you almost have to take the local element out of it when you assess those performances, because I think there's always a tendency, because it's Sunderland, because the passions are more heightened, and if it was better, it was marginal. I thought Brentford was the worst performance of Eddie's reign. So I don't think it was... I mean, it's not far off, by the way. But it's difficult to make any positives. Well, you shouldn't have to make any positives out of it because there weren't any. So it's right up there.
I think my response would be...
Maybe it's worse because it was a derby, actually.
Yeah, there is that element. And I actually think it was worse than Brentford and West Ham. But let's say that you agree with Eddie Howe and it was better. Why is that the bar?
Yeah, and why should there be a bar? I mean, I think it's a bit of a silly comment to say it was better than those because
you just reminded everyone about how bad it was.
Yeah, absolutely. But not just that, but no, I think I'll go back to what I said there. I think it's probably worse because it was a derby, because we expect Eddie Howe sides to turn up in these big games, which again is the wrong mentality to have. You should turn up in every game. But that's the one thing he's done throughout his reign. They've turned up for big games. So his very first season when they were when they're trying to stay in the Premier League, the Arsenal game, when they blew away an Arsenal side at St James's, captained by Conor Xhaka, by the way. The second season when they won big games at St James's, when they qualified for the Champions League, the Carabao Cup run, you look at all those games, they turn up in big games. That's what Newcastle did. And yesterday, they failed. They failed in every single department. And it just wasn't good enough.
Just going to read a few more quotes from Bruno we've mentioned. He says, it's so embarrassing for me and frustrating because we know we have a better team than them. It's clear for me, but we didn't perform like a better team today. It makes me feel angry. Eddie Howe also added that criticism comes with every defeat, but this one will be louder and stronger just because of the game and the importance. We fully acknowledge that, and that's why it hurts so much. It's disappointing for our supporters, and I'm sorry.
I think there's a little bit of arrogance crept in there, and it's at the wrong time. You don't go out and say you're a better team than someone when you've just been out-battled, out-fought, outran. You don't do that in the aftermath of a defeat like that. You take it on the chin. You say we weren't good enough. Yes, be angry. Players didn't do what they were meant to do and all that sort of stuff. But you don't come out and say something like that.
Interesting that you mentioned about being outran. And we can see here that the stats suggest that Newcastle... I know this is kind of it's futile really, but Newcastle ran 3.8% more distance according to the stats.
But
look, there's no denying who wanted it more, who had more energy, and who just were better on the afternoon.
So I'd like to know how many of those runs were
forward,
yeah, or how many of those runs were going to get that loose ball or going into that challenge. You can run up and down a pitch for 90 minutes all you want. You're not doing anything.
I think that's the most frustrating thing about just Sundays, that, as I said at the start, people watching this, people listening to this, would give anything to run on to that pitch for 5 minutes against their local rivals, and they would give absolutely everything they've got. And when you read comments from Eddie Howe and others, and they're talking about, we did leave something on the pitch. Well, no, this is the most important game. Like, there should be nothing left.
I said at the very start, there is nobody coming off that pitch yesterday that can look themselves in the mirror and say, we did everything we could to help Newcastle United win that game. Not one of them. Bruno was marginally better than the rest, marginally. But not one of them can look back on that 90 minutes with any pride, and I include the manager and the assistant manager in that.
In terms of the impact of losing this game, we all hoped Newcastle would win it. Dust off that good old saying about a kickstart on their season. But obviously they've lost it. What happens now?
What happens now is, I argue, Wednesday is must win and Saturday is must win. Now I'm going to counteract that by saying, as I said earlier, if they put in the sort of performance we expected yesterday on Wednesday and Saturday, I think that would just frustrate me even more. You can't pick and choose when you turn up. Now, football, we've done this long enough. We know there are games when it just doesn't happen for you. But if it's not happening for you, if you're not quite at the levels in terms of ability on the day, fair enough. But by God, if that happens, you keep running, you go into those challenges, you make sure that you're winning every single 50-50, that you're getting to those loose balls first. You drag yourself through games. Yesterday was a classic example when Newcastle had nobody to drag them through that game, as much as Bruno tried in spells. We've seen ups and downs. I've seen worse Newcastle United sides than the one we saw yesterday win derbies because of that. because they went out and they put in that extra effort. And that's why it would really frustrate me. As much as we want them to win on Wednesday, I absolutely want to win to try and get closer to more silverware. I want them to win on Saturday because to try and rein in the Champions League places or close that gap to European places. But I think I'd just come out of those two games going, why couldn't you do that on Sunday?
Jacob Murphy, I think Eddie Howe as well, one way or another, has suggested that this can be motivation. Jacob Murphy said they can bottle the disappointment and use it to spur them on. Is that something that you see happening?
Why not bottle the delight after the Man City win and use that as inspiration? Why not bottle what you did in the Carabao Cup final as inspiration to go and do it again? Why not bottle the Benfica home game?
And is this the issue as well? Like, obviously, we can criticize Eddie Howe for making the wrong team selections. We can criticize him for maybe being too stubborn in his ways when it comes to formation. But the players have to take some responsibility. And you mentioned it before. If you're looking at Bruno literally running himself into the ground, then why aren't you, as Anthony Gordon, Harvey Barnes, whoever it is, why aren't you, as you said, matching Bruno's levels and want and desire? The players have to take some responsibility for, as we've titled this, putting in an acceptable performance.
And why do you need disappointment
to be motivated?
To be motivational? Yeah. That's again, it's a mentality question. Do you think the Manchester Uniteds of the late 2000s, the late 90s, or the Arsenals of the early 2000s, or the Chelsea under Mourinho, do you think they used disappointment as a motivating factor? No. They used, we want to win every game as the motivation. They used, we're going to prove people wrong as the motivation. Why do Newcastle need to use disappointment as motivation? That makes no sense whatsoever. And that's why, and I'm sorry I keep going back to it, if they want to become an elite club, that mentality has to change. Disappointment can't be a motivating factor as a Premier League footballer.
Indeed. And the final point I just want to make, obviously Sunderland, quite understandably, quite rightly, took a selfie in front of their fans at full time. And I fully applaud that absolute S-housery, because they were just getting their own back on something Newcastle United did. I'm going to make a little prediction, though. I don't think we'll see another victory selfie, not because Newcastle aren't going to win another game. They will win other games, hopefully starting on Wednesday against Fulham. But I don't think we'll see another dressing room selfie now. I think that might be it. I think that might be one of the things that come out of this. And it sounds minuscule, but actually I think it's quite a big thing. It's like, why are we taking pictures and celebrating after just getting past Burnley, who had 10 men, sort of thing? Do you know what I mean? Big occasions, fine, but I think that might be one of the little things that we just see ebb out.
If you're going to give it out, you learn to take it.
Oh, 100%. I got no issue with it.
And Newcastle absolutely have to take what they were given yesterday throughout the 90 minutes and afterwards as well. Sunderland earned that win. They were the better side. They wanted it more. They showed more desire, and they deserve to enjoy it. Because, and I know we say we've had difficult times with, kind of limited ambition and stuff and relegations. Sunderland haven't been in League One, 3 years ago, to be in the Premier League, to be doing what they're doing. They fully deserved yesterday. And that's, from a Newcastle point of view, that's quite sad to say that. So they can enjoy it, absolutely. And Newcastle have to move on quickly. And they've got a lot of questions to answer now.
Final few comments and before we sign off. Stuart says they play good at home because they can't hide. The crowd won't allow it. This leadership team they have needs ripped up and binned because there's no leadership out there on the pitch.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I think they need a different type of leader. That's not necessarily saying, and I don't think Bruno should be replaced as captain at all, but I think they need a Trippier style figure out there with them consistently. Or, again, I keep going back to someone like a Roy Keane or a Shearer, where they are actually like imposing themselves on the teammates and having it go and hauling them through difficult moments. Because yesterday I looked around and it looked quiet. Everyone looked quiet, like almost shell-shocked. And that's not good enough. And that ain't going to get you the levels Newcastle United want to be at.
Graham makes the point about the running stats, that it was probably 3.8% more chasing.
Very good point.
And we've got another Graham who who says Fulham midweek is a chance to recover, but away form needs to rethink. We're too deep and basically don't get any shots at goal. Wingers produce no service. Maybe go 4-4-2. He also suggests that maybe it's time for Eddie Howe to go. It is a big week. Fingers crossed they can pick up victory against Fulham. Will we see another selfie if they do?
I kind of hope not, if I'm honest.
Well, hopefully we're put in the position. We need one. And if they don't do it, then I'm proved right. But fingers crossed, it is 3 points. We need an immediate reaction. It won't rid us of the nightmare of Wearside that can only come in the return fixture in a few months' time. Yeah, sorry it's not a bit more positive, but hopefully the raw emotion has touched a nerve with you guys and you are echoing some of our thoughts. And if not, let us know in the comments what we've said wrong and what we've said right. We always enjoy the interaction. Big thanks to you guys for watching and listening, and we'll catch you guys very soon.